Yo, last week the AI search engine battle got heated. You got Microsoft and Bing and OpenAI. You got Google and Bard, and it's all come to a head. So much information. Google stock is tanking. Maybe Microsoft nailed it. I don't know. There's so much to unpack that happened over the course of the week on the SEO Weekly. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the SEO Weekly, where queries are weird, advice is controversial, and everything depends. I'm your host, Garrett Sussman of iPullRank, and every week I cover everything going on in the world of SEO. We're talking Google updates, blog posts, podcasts, community, Twitter, LinkedIn, tools, features, AI-generated search, you name it, I'm on it. If you're into this stuff, please subscribe to the channel, give us a like, share on the socials, leave a comment. I genuinely appreciate it. It is Black History Month, and being a Black-owned agency at iPullRank by Michael King, we've got some really cool events. Last week, we actually had sharing our experience. Some of our Black male members of the office got onto LinkedIn Live and just chatted about their personal experiences.
I mean, I think it's just a reality of being Black in America, and not just Black, like other people of color as well. But, you know, it's Black History Month, so that's what we're talking about. You just live with certain pressures every day, right? And like you, when you don't live with that, you can't really even understand it, right? Like when you feel like you could go outside and get shot by a cop at any day for no reason, it's something that's always like a base level of noise in your head. Now, if you don't have to deal with that, you can't even understand that, like, hey, I'm distracted today because I just saw another example of this. And it's difficult to make other people understand that. It's also difficult to make them understand that, like, these sort of things in different ways. Like, okay, I know that I'm going to walk into a meeting and I'm going to experience microaggressions that people are going to be like, oh, why are you so mad? Why are you the angry Black guy? Like, because you said something foul to me. How about that? You know what I mean? And so people just can't really understand where you're coming from with that sort of thing. And it's something that you've got to really learn to navigate. And I think it's something that we all just kind of naturally learn to navigate. But there are certain moments, especially when you see something in the news, where you're just like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I, pushing this down? Like, I'm ready to put a black beret on and get a machine gun and go outside and go crazy. Obviously, you don't actually want to do those things, but like you have this feeling of rage that you just have to navigate all the time. And it gets in the way of you doing your best work. Like, that's just the reality of it. But we all just have to find ways that we can do something productive and positive. And some days that's just doing your work well. And some days it's like, I got to take the day off. I got to, go do something that's going to make me feel better about being a Black man in this world. But these are all complex things that we've got to navigate that just people that aren't experiencing this just can't understand.
This week, we have a couple of our female Black representatives of the agency who are talking about their experience. And then at the end of the month, on Thursday, February 23rd at 1 p.m., everyone is talking about influence, the impact of Black culture on the marketing industry. It's a webinar just kind of running through the ways that Black culture has really defined marketing and impacted it. I am so excited. There's so much to cover there. It's really going to be a great event. And then we'll have that all documented where those resources can be watched, but you can register for it in the show notes. Okay, there's a lot of AI generative content to talk about this week, so let's get into it. Okay, so the big feature story. Last week, heavyweight bout between Alphabet and Microsoft going into overdrive. On the one hand, you have Alphabet and Google and their new conversational AI tool, Bard. On the other hand, you have Microsoft's Bing and their browser Edge, where they've invested a significant amount in the company OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT, and will be integrating that into their search engine. So, timeline of events, what went down. If you watched my episode of the SEO Weekly last week, I was talking about the apprentice Bard and how they were testing it internally according to a report from CNBC. Well, hours later, February 6th, Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Alphabet, puts out a blog post talking all about the introduction of Bard. February 7th, Microsoft has their major event showcasing Bing and the integration of ChatGPT and OpenAI AI-generated technology. PR campaign, the CEO, Satya Nadella, basically has an interview with The Verge with a lot more insights and information. Then on February 8th, Google has its big Paris event. Everyone thought it was going to be about Bard, but really it was a footnote for the event. And then Reuters writes this scathing article about how Bard actually has misinformation, factually incorrect information in their advertisement, which tanks Google and Alphabet's stock value by $100 billion or 9%. Yikes. Okay, so let's dive into these different events, these different publications, and what everything means. Last Monday, Sundar Pichai publishes his blog post introducing us to Bard. What is Bard? So Bard is Google's conversational AI that they will be inserting into Google search, powered by LaMDA. That's its language model for dialogue application. Basically, it's a super powered GPT that actually pulls from real indexed information on the internet. So it's real time. It doesn't have the limitation of ChatGPT that's only trained on information up until 2021. What happens is you put in a query and it spits out an answer. It's a more advanced featured snippet. Now, what we've seen so far in the examples that showed in that post was that it does not cite articles directly within the text. We see a read more articles referenced, but we don't know if they're just relevant or if they're pulled from anything that's actually in the text. One thing that's called out is that sometimes you have a subjective question without a single right answer. NORA, no one right answer. And so Bard aims to provide different perspectives. For instance, in the example, they ask, what's easier to learn, a guitar or a piano? Or the other example is, what are the best constellations to view? These are subjective questions. So Bard is going to provide a multiple perspectives and some more information as to why that is the case. Interesting. Is that what people are looking for? I don't know. The other issue that Sundar pointed out was responsible AI, something that Google researchers have been writing about since 2018 with their principles. The whole idea that they're trying to use AI technology that benefits humankind, that benefits us and does not create, that bad players can't take advantage of, which it's not always great at. There's still a long ways to go, but at least they transparently say that is their goal. So we know that sometimes these AI generation models produce factually incorrect information. And published on February 8th, Reuters identified within this blog post an example that was used that was factually incorrect. They point out that in the ad, Bard is given the prompt, what new discoveries from the James Webb Space Telescope can I tell my 9-year-old about? Bard responds with a number of answers, including one suggesting that the JWST was used to take the very first pictures of a planet outside the Earth's solar system, or exoplanets. The first pictures of exoplanets were, however, taken by the European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope in 2004, as confirmed by NASA. Now, the consequences of this is on the 8th, Google lost $100 billion in market value, almost 9% as a result of this story and the deflating PR surrounding Bard's release. Now, it's important to know that the way that Bard operates, it's conversational AI. It's basically a more advanced text virtual voice assistant that Google already had. Okay, so obviously Google is throwing Bard out there despite the fact that it's not even being rolled out yet. And they needed to make a big statement, right? Whether or not it worked, the statement is out there, but our own founder and CEO, Michael King, shared his take on LinkedIn. Here comes my dramatic retelling of Mike's explanation of what Sundar is trying to say.
Allow me to translate Sundar's post. Oh, y'all like that chat GPT thing? Cool. You know it's based off of our tech, right? We've been an AI company since before it was cool. Anyway, here's our version. It's called Bard, and it's always up to date. We're adding it to the search engine that you actually use. By the way, we have other even better tech, but we're adults, so we're not going to give it to you yet, because y'all don't know how to act. Oh, and OpenAI, keep playing with me and I'm going to come for your business. All right, everybody good? Cool. Sundar out.
This is just one product. Google may come out with other products that are more competitive with ChatGPT that allows you to do more. But right now, the big question on SEO's minds is how will this ultimately impact search? We'll talk about that momentarily. First, I want to move on to Microsoft and Bing. So on Tuesday, February 7th, Microsoft held their big event in Seattle to cover how Bing and their browser Edge are going to integrate OpenAI's sort of chat GPT sort of advance into the search and browser product. Now, BarrySchwartz did a fantastic job of live tweeting the whole event. But in essence, they went through the history of search and the goals to provide authoritative information and how they were now going to implement ChatGPT or an AI chat as a copilot in your search experience. Now, few things that differentiate Bing's use of AI chat from Google's Bard, at least in these first iterations, is the interactive on the right-hand side output of the AI generated query answer, which includes citations from websites and information that has been indexed by Bing in real time. No longer are we having that 2021 limitation of text being trained on past content. It is up to date in real time. It also has citations. So as you're seeing the generated text, you're seeing little footnote citations that you can click on. Now, there are some advertisements in the options of the citations as shown by Barry, but you can click on these citations to learn more information. Not only that, it provides additional kind of related questions and related topics and related websites that you can click on to dive in deeper. Now, they acknowledge there's some potential issues with the answers and there's the ability to provide feedback so you can get, so they can improve the product further. The second part of this is not only is it just the search interactive conversational AI like Bard, but there is a chat component for generating and composing content. So you'll be able to switch in the browser between the search and the actual, chat GPT sort of AI copilot generation product. So you can go back and forth with that. It's really cool. On the website, on Bing, you can actually see what examples are and join the wait list right now. So for instance, they show things like creating a 3-course menu or helping me plan my fishing trip or help me find a pet, asking questions of like, how do I pick the right dog breed? And is it better to adopt or not? And then what does it do? It spits out this example with these different criteria so you can jump between, with these different citations, so you can jump between the output and other websites. And you can see it has learn more. You can go to the website and then bounce back, get your information, an example, the American Kennel Club, and then go back to the AI example. This whole thing is interactive on their website. So definitely check it out, decide for yourself. One of the criticisms of Bing is there's a lot going on. It's not as simple and clean as Google search, but Bing might potentially get a lot of market share from this new Copilot AI, OpenAI implementation. A lot to pay attention to there. In addition to the live event in Seattle, Microsoft was on a full PR pitch campaign going all over the place. In fact, Nilay Patel of The Verge interviewed CEO Satya Nadella about what AI and Microsoft means going forward. Specifically, there's a whole ton of really interesting insights in terms of their principles on, responsibility and authority and what potential issues they could run into. But one interesting question that Nilay had for Satya was all around what is the value that incentivizes content creators and websites to continue to create authoritative content. And I'll let Satya, we got a little clip from that audio. I'll let Satya share his take.
At the end of the day, search is about fair use. Ultimately, all this content we only get to use inside of a search engine if you're generating traffic for the people who create it. And so that's why if you look at whether it's in the answer, whether it's in chat, these are just a different way to represent the 10 blue links, more in the context of what the user wants. So the core measure, even what SEO looks like, if anything, that'll be the thing in the next multiple years. We'll all learn. Perhaps there will be new incentives in SEO to even generate more authoritative content that then gets in. So overall, everything you saw there had annotations, everything was linkable, and that'll be the goal, whether it's inside a search, whether it's in the answer, or even in the chat session.
So it's interesting that Microsoft is really bullish on including citations within the generative text. And that is ultimately what SEOs want. It leads to a bigger question about how ultimately conversational AI or generative AI within search is going to impact user behavior. How does this all tie back to SEOs and what should we do? Well, first off, we should really be paying attention to how our users and our audience search. We actually had an impromptu Twitter chat last week with Marie Haynes that you can see on Rankable that we uploaded. Well, it's all audio, but we were talking about what you need to consider and what you're going to be paying attention to. Here's what Dr. Marie Haynes is actually going to be paying attention to when BARD is rolled out and how it's going to impact SEO.
Yeah, I mean, I think at first, they've said that we're going to see just testing. People are going to test this Lambda chatbot. And then we know that Google's going to take that feedback. They talked about Google Sparrow. And I wrote a newsletter just last week about a paper that, explains how Sparrow is Google's response to everybody's complaint about how AI-generated dialogue is inaccurate and can be potentially biased. And so what Google is going to do is take the feedback of the early users and use that in machine learning algorithms to make it more safe, to make it more accurate. So that's the first thing, that we're going to see. And Google told us in the announcement that we're going to see it in search soon.
And it's really interesting to think about. So what do you think is going to happen with SEO? Do you think just top of the funnel types of queries are going to be impacted? Do you think conversational AI is not really going to be a great user experience? Do you think people's queries are going to change? And so our keyword research and the way that we tackle content is going to be different. All of those are potential consequences of these new AI tools implemented directly into search. Meanwhile, on the 8th in Paris, Google held an event that was honestly somewhat underwhelming. Basically, the SEO community was anticipating a whole kind of deep dive into BARD and what it meant and what the features would look like, similar to what Microsoft put out, but that wasn't the case. Honestly, it was more focused on multi-search, which we've touched on in the past, the ability to look at any sort of imagery on your phone and be able to search it using, kind of photo AI or Google Lens, which, is somewhat interesting. They did touch briefly on BARD and then ultimately released new AI content guidelines that we're going to talk about momentarily. But, Danny Sullivan had a great breakdown on Twitter. It's somewhat helpful, but as mentioned, ultimately it was disappointing. And mini conspiracy theory, like the PR got really, really bad because the live video disappeared from Google's YouTube channel, with everyone kind of thinking for a minute that it was so bad they had to hide it. It has returned since then, so not the case, but obviously the media machine churns. And it was also at that point that Reuters dropped their article highlighting the misinformation on the Bard example that ultimately really tanked Alphabet stock. It started to recover. It's actually interesting when you look in comparison between Microsoft stock and Alphabet stock over the past week, and they have been, different directions. Ultimately, Microsoft is kind of plateauing out. Google is still a little bit lower, but it'll be very interesting to see what happens over the next few months with Alphabet stock. I don't know. And then if you look at actual Google Trends and search, there isn't a major significant uptick. There was a brief uptick for Bard, if you see in comparison to Bing, and then ChatGPT just continues to skyrocket. And maybe because it's just really taken the whole media by storm, that it's been around for a few months now and people are still obsessed with it. But Bard and Bing hasn't really gotten the sort of interest, the national, international interest that ChatGPT is. One interesting Google Trends, you can see this screenshot, is that there's apparently the middle America is much more into Bing and the coasts are much more into Bard. So take that for what it's worth. To put a nice little bow on this whole conversational AI situation, The Verge had another great article, this one put out by James Vincent, talking all about the 7 problems facing Bing, Bard, and the future of AI search. All considerations that they need to be cognizant of, be aware of, that will ultimately impact whether or not A, it's adopted by searchers, and B, whether it makes the world a better or worse place, because we're in the information age still, and we really do depend on our search engines to get information. So first off, AI helpers or bullshit generators? Are they going to improve in terms of how helpful they are to get us the information they need, or are we going to continue to run into factually incorrect information, which is only going to devalue a search product and ultimately make it untrustworthy? The one true answer question, sometimes subjective questions like what's the best this, or is this harder or that harder, they're subjective. They don't have one right answer. And so how are these, these tools, obviously Bard and Bing are both trying to address this. How are they going to provide multiple perspectives that people actually want, and how will it address biases based on what they're trained on, which is ultimately the content on the internet, right? Jailbreaking AIs, they have these parameters in place. ChatGPT has tried to make it so it doesn't spit out racist, misogynistic, awful answers. And there are ways, at least currently, to put in a prompt that will get around the parameters, the constraints that these tools have. What happens when people jailbreak these AIs and then use them for nefarious means? It feels inevitable, and yet that cannot happen. That is problematic. We already see the fake news issue. Here comes the AI culture wars. So we're already hearing the narrative around how this technology benefits one type of political spectrum versus the other, especially in the US. There's already conversations about ChatGPT being woke, or why it will, for instance, say, what if Trump lost the last election versus what if Hillary had won it? Things like that are obviously problematic politically, and it's going to kind of create this atmosphere, obviously in the US, that's political unrest. Burning cache and computation, basically the cost of AI, it costs more money to use these tools. The OpenAI, Sam Altman has already talked about this. It's not transparent how much it'll cost, but is it sustainable in the long run? We've heard the issues with, crypto and blockchain and Bitcoin and all that. The same thing will ultimately happen for AI tools. When does it become problematic? Regulation. Right now, it's hard to know if the US will get in the game ultimately of regulating AI generative tools. There's so many folks who are out of touch who don't understand technology and not ideal to regulate it, but AI technology does need regulation from governments. The more likely implementation of regulation will be from the EU, and having stiff fines and penalties for not fitting into what their regulations are, but we don't know what that'll look like yet. So worth paying attention to there. And then finally, the end of the web as we know it. If these AI generators become so good that it's not incentivizing content creators to create authoritative content, will the web die? You know, what if we just run out of original web? Now, I don't think that's actually an issue. People will somehow find ways to move away from the main search players. And I think if anything, this will provide opportunities for other types of search engines that benefit content creators to emerge. So it will ultimately not die. It will just look different, but how these tools handle this will be important in terms of how they exist as marketing channels going forward. So lots to pay attention to. What do you think of this whole conversation? Are you on one side or the other? Do you feel strongly that AI shouldn't be implemented into search? Do you think Bing's going to win? Do you think Google's going to win? Give us your take. So the other big part of this whole AI generation debate is, how does Google handle AI generated content for its own search rankings? And on Wednesday, they put out a much more definitive set of guidelines. Specifically, they addressed kind of what we knew already, and Danny Sullivan has been saying for months and months and months, is that as long as the content is helpful, isn't misleading, isn't created just for the sake of manipulating the rankings and ranking really high, then Google's cool with it. You can have a completely AI generated content if it adds something new, it's original, it's unique. Now, you could make the debate about how purely generated AI content is never actually original. And I would never recommend not editing the AI content, using it for your published articles, but Google technically is cool with it. They said, you know, they do recommend focusing on providing a good, helpful experience. You know, the helpful content system and the quality rater guidelines are intended to make sure that quality content rises to the top and spammy, crappy content goes down to the bottom. The issue is whether or not that is always the case. In fact, in the frequently asked questions, Google addressed a couple of key points. One, is AI content against Google search guidelines? Appropriate use of AI or automation is not against our guidelines. This means that it is not used to generate content primarily to manipulate search rankings, which is against our spam policies. Then they ask, how will Google search prevent poor quality AI content from taking over search results? Poor quality content isn't a new challenge for Google search to deal with. We've been tackling poor quality content created both by humans and automation for years. We have existing systems to determine the helpfulness of content. Other systems work to elevate original news reporting. Our systems continue to be regularly improved. And honestly, that's one of the biggest issues that SEOs have, is right now, Google is still not great at finding that spammy, crappy content. There are many, many situations where it surfaces to the top. So the fear for SEOs is they're not going to be able to catch all the awful AI-generated spammy content that's produced. Time will tell. We will see. Hopefully, they'll improve these systems to the extent that it's not an issue, but this has been an issue for a while. In fact, our own Michael King gave his take, and I will retell it in, as appropriately a voice as I can. Here we go. On LinkedIn, Michael says,
Google has issued its official stance on generative AI content. Here's my translation. What's up, y'all? It's Google. You know our algorithms are crazy good, right? Like, the best. On the real, your spam doesn't really stand a chance. Okay. So we're all in on this generative AI thing as a company, and we know we can't tell you not to use it anymore. But, we've been detecting your fake stuff for years anyway, so try us if you want to. Oh, and don't try to make up fake authors to get around EEAT. We good? Cool.
To Mike's last point, they do actually have guidelines around the authors. And basically what they say is, should I add author bylines to all my content? You should consider having accurate author bylines when readers would reasonably expect it, such as to any content where someone might think, who wrote this? And as a reminder, publishers that appear in Google News should use bylines and author information. Learn more on the Google News policy page. Then they say, should I add AI or automation disclosures to my content? AI or automation disclosures are useful for content where someone might think, how was this created? Consider adding these when it would be reasonably expected. And finally, can I list AI content as the author? Can I list AI as the author of the content? Giving AI an author byline is probably not the best way to follow our recommendations to make clear to readers when AI is part of the content creation process. So somewhat ambiguous, but get your real human authors bylines on there. If someone expects you to, name that it's by AI, do it. But who knows? I think for the most part, if the majority of the content is written by AI, you probably should. But there is going to be a reputation hit, because if someone knows content's written by AI, it doesn't seem as authentic, believable, or reliable. I mean, that's just where we are from the kind of media mass perception at this point. And finally, don't just use AI as the author for structured data, because that's not the intention of author structured data. So there you go. That's Google's guidelines. What are Bing's guidelines? They're basically like, just make sure a human's involved. That's pretty much all Bing says in their webmaster guidelines. Either way, now you know, as we've been saying all along, it doesn't matter who creates it. If it's spammy, it should get devalued. If it's quality, it should rank. Boom. Non-AI related Google tidbit. Martin Split had a great lightning talk on the Google Search YouTube channel all about how you can use Chrome's dev browser web tools in order to debug JavaScript issues. So he goes through things like inspecting the DOM, using network panel inspection to debug different JavaScript situations, and just tools for performance, cache performance, storage debugging, all that, 5 minutes, super helpful before you go into like the bigger, SEO, technical SEO tools that you might use to debug. So awesome video, check it out. So I realized I talked a whole bunch about Google and Microsoft and how AI is being implemented in search. But on the other side of things, you can't completely ignore Neeva, which is another search engine that is having their own AI tools. And who knows if they'll be able to gain market share, but they're being very transparent with their documentation, their issues, kind of building in public on Twitter. So last week, really cool series of Twitter threads all around Franken answers. Why do some of their answers come out awfully wrong, like completely missing the query? And they break it down in terms of how they mix up entities and search intent, which is really fascinating. If you put in a query, you ask a complicated question, and it can be interpreted in multiple ways. How does the AI know how to answer the question that you're actually asking, the intent? So in the second thread, they break down how they identify the dominant intent and provide that answer. Ultimately, the goal would be to provide answers for all the different intents in a way that's easily consumable, but they're finally figuring out how to unfrank an answer, because if you have this mix-up of all these different intents, you can have a hilariously wrong answer. So they're starting to make progress. It's really cool and worth paying attention to what Neeva is doing. Like I said, will they get market share? I don't know. Nonetheless, I like what they're doing. Another day, another publisher smearing the name of AI-generated content. So John Christian published another article on futurism calling out Men's Journal. So the owner of Men's Journal and Sports Illustrated, they said they were going to use AI content, but in a responsible way. Well, their very first article all about low testosterone in men is a disaster. John did the research and basically found that there was so many errors, despite the article looking confident and academic with citations and this, that, and the other thing. And while there's a ring of truth to most of the content, it was misleading or misrepresented or just flat out wrong. And they haven't even accurately updated the article. So it's just a really bad look for using AI generated content. If you publish, if it's not edited and thoroughly fact-checked by an editing team. Specifically, the fact that this is giving health advice makes it significantly worse. Anything, your money, your life, that people could ultimately take and do serious harm to themselves is really problematic and morally unethical. So we're going to keep our eyes peeled on more instances of this. Now, It's not to say that you shouldn't use AI generated content, but you really need to edit and fact check it. Please. Please. And one last take that I wanted to cover, I thought was an interesting conversation on Near Media with Mike Blumenthal, Greg Sterling, Joy Hawkins, and Kevin Indig, talking all about different ways that AI generation and SEO will be impacted with these tools. Talked about both local SEO, using it for content creation, what are the risks, limitations, a lot of stuff that we've already covered, but some nuances that I think it's a great conversation worth listening to. In fact, Kevin Indig shared his take on how he thinks, this barred rollout in combination similar to snippets, how it might potentially impact search traffic. Here's what Kevin had to say.
I think in terms of clicks through to websites for certain types of queries, right? I think any keyword that triggers a featured snippet today is very likely to have sort of like an AI answer in the future. And I think it's likely that people might just narrow their search down. They might just interact with the chatbot. Again, we don't know that for sure. There might be a case where people want results from a diversity of websites, and then they might still want to click through to different websites. They might distrust the machine because they understand this is an AI generated answer and they actually want something from a human. But if I think if you don't see a lot of traffic because it's a featured snippet on a SERP today, you probably won't see a lot of traffic from the AI generated result either.
So great conversation. Definitely check out the full one. It's about 45 minutes long, but they cover everything from how do you think AI changes the economics of SEO? What tools make clients less reliant on agencies? What concerns do you have about ChatGPT and AI tools, as well as how it will impact search? So check it out. So believe it or not, there is some SEO content out there that's not AI generated. No, honestly, there's a ton. It's just there's been this AI stuff has been in the news. But I wanted to cover two articles that really got my attention. The first is Samuel Schmidt talking all about topic clusters, how to build out a really effective topic cluster. That's been a theme over the last couple of weeks. This one, he does a case study of how he takes kind of a long form article and really breaks down step by step, super actionable, play by play, breaking out the keywords, breaking out the pillar page, making the pillar pages and the little cluster topic articles. Super informative, super helpful. Well done by Samuel. And then the other article is on Wix by Carrie O'Brien, talking all about SEO content and brand messaging, how your brand messaging ultimately impacts search. Carrie does a great job talking about the importance of brand messaging and how it relates back to your visibility in SERPs, how your messaging, creates that stickiness and shareability, both in terms of like your meta descriptions and your titles, but then ultimately how to build out that voice and that brand and how to do that effectively with storytelling across all of your assets so that when people do find you on search, it's a really effective, memorable experience. Great articles, those two. Hopefully next week we'll have some more like SEO non-AI related articles, but these were the two that really surfaced to the top for me. In the world of SEO tools, Lighthouse, which is a tool provided by Google to help you identify website performance, diagnose it based on Core Web Vitals, has been updated, version 10. Now they're actually removing the time to interactive, which is, basically there are too many outliers that were augmenting the time and it wasn't really like a fair representation of Core Web Vitals. It's basically being replaced by total blocking time, but the 10% weighting on performance in terms of your score is actually being moved over to your cumulative layout shift. And from there sort of analytics and evaluation, that seemed to be more accurate towards performance. So really important tool to, kind of improve your website performance, audit it, and make sure that it is top speed. Obviously, from all the past years, it's not a definitive factor, but it's a time breaker in terms of how fast your website loads and performs. It's an important tool, Lighthouse. So, make sure you're paying attention to that and check that out. Try out the new version. So cool AI tool from Jared Zonarek. Basically, if you are doing a ton of prompt engineering, he put together, it's based on OpenAI's API, but this promptlayer.com, it allows you to iterate, track, debug and stay on top of all your prompt building and then reuse them, so you're not just like doing it once and then forgetting and losing it, building out that library. Shout out to Charlie Monnier for, bringing that up on Twitter, but really cool looking tool that would be super helpful as we all get into building out these prompt engineering libraries. Y'all, we've been working on something for a while and we're ready in beta. Rank tracking software, brand new, looking for beta testers. Exact Science. I'm super excited. We've been playing around with it, so check it out. This rank tracker looks at pixel changes, which is so important with all the SERPs coming out. It allows you to segment by tags based on like need state, personas, or whatever topic clusters you're building. There's so many nuances. It's ideal at scale. We are currently having people sign up for a 7-day free trial. You track these 30 keywords. We're looking for feedback. We'd love to know what you like, don't like, if it works, doesn't work. So the link is in the description. Please give it a whirl and let us know what you think. Exact Science is badass. Excuse my language, but it's really cool. Super excited to be working on that. Well, that's it. Another episode of the SEO Weekly in the books. Thank you so much for checking all this out. Oh my gosh, AI search. It's such a fascinating conversation. Last week was absolutely nuts. My name is Garrett Sussman of iPullRank. As always, if you're into this, please subscribe to the channel, give us a like, share, leave a comment, share on the socials, register for that webinar at the end of the month, and try out Exact Science. I'm super excited and geeked and want to hear your feedback personally. So y'all have a great week. We will catch you next week.